It's really, you know, given us as Guy, Timmy Gatlin, Aaron Hall, and myself an incredible hope.
A lot of people don't realize this, but I got into the music game by being an intern.
The highly anticipated trial against Sean Diddy Combs is now underway. It was a whirlwind day. A jury was seated. Opening statements were delivered, and the first two witnesses, a male escort and a former security guard, were called.
Why Teddy Riley has gone real quiet after Diddy's trial might not be the mystery people think it is. Because when you look at how close they were, behind closed doors in those early Uptown sessions, at the parties nobody was supposed to talk about, it starts to make sense. Teddy Riley was one of them.
When you know too much and you show them you know too much, that's when they throw you away.
He was there, in the sessions, in the circles, maybe even in the rooms people are now testifying about. And that's why his silence isn't just silence anymore. It's protection. It's fear, or maybe it's guilt. Whatever it is, it's loud. Before Diddy became a household name, before Bad Boy Records reshaped the music industry, Teddy Riley had already laid the foundation. He didn't just produce hits, he redefined black music. Riley was the mind behind New Jack Swing, a sound that fused hip-hop beats with R&B vocals, injecting both with a polished energy that hadn't existed before. And for a young intern named Sean Combs, watching that unfold up close was like attending a masterclass in how to control the charts. Their paths first crossed at Uptown Records. Riley was already a respected producer, known for his work with Guy, Bobby Brown, and Heavy D. Diddy, still just Puff, was an intern and A&R assistant. But more than getting coffee and doing paperwork, he was paying attention. Very close attention. Teddy Riley was creating a sound that was dominating both the streets and the Billboard charts. Hits like No Diggity and My Prerogative were more than songs. They were blueprints.
No diggity, no doubt.
And Diddy was absorbing it all. When Diddy finally launched Bad Boy Records, you could hear Riley's DNA all over it. The tight drum programming, the layered melodies, the hip-hop meets soul approach. It was New Jack Swing's influence, rebranded and repackaged for a new era. But Diddy didn't just copy the sound, he mimicked the strategy. Riley had proven you could produce, manage, and shape an entire movement. Diddy took that formula and added aggressive marketing and branding. Some say it was the student perfecting the teacher's method. Others believe Diddy simply used what Riley never tried to control: the business of image. Still, in the early days, there wasn't any tension. Riley welcomed the younger Combs. He didn't see him as a threat, not yet. In fact, some insiders suggest that Riley even mentored Diddy, letting him sit in on studio sessions and learn how to direct an artist through a take, how to layer vocals, how to build a radio hit from scratch.
It's really, you know, given us as Guy, Timmy Gatlin, Aaron Hall, and myself an incredible hope.
A lot of people don't realize this, but I got into the music game by being an intern.
But with that generosity came an unspoken risk, because what Diddy learned, he didn't always credit. Years later, Riley's influence would be scrubbed from the narrative as Diddy took front and center as the genius producer, mogul, and tastemaker. To the public, Diddy invented the shiny suit era. Behind the scenes, some argue he just polished Riley's playbook. Riley's sound defined the late 80s and early 90s. But as Diddy emerged with Bad Boy, a new generation began associating that same sonic texture with him. Riley, still deeply respected in production circles, quietly watched his style rebranded under a new name. Some say it was fair game, that art evolves. Others insist it was a quiet theft, where Diddy benefited from Riley's groundwork without ever truly acknowledging it. One example of this overlap came during the Blackstreet remix of Don't Leave Me, where the notorious B.I.G., Diddy's biggest artist, was featured. It was one of the rare public collaborations between Riley's camp and Diddy's empire, but even that track felt like a symbolic handoff. Biggie brought the raw edge, Riley polished it. But in the public eye, it was Bad Boy that got the glow. The early connection between Riley and Diddy was pivotal, but what started as mentorship and mutual respect eventually became overshadowed by branding, ego, and revisionist history. Diddy soared into executive superstardom. Riley remained a behind-the-scenes legend. And over time, people stopped asking, how much of Diddy's empire was actually built on Teddy's foundation? By the mid-90s, the student had surpassed the teacher, at least in terms of public image. Diddy wasn't just a young intern anymore. He was Puff Daddy now, the face of Bad Boy, the voice on every remix, and the man behind the parties that had everyone in the industry talking. But what most people missed is this: Teddy Riley was still around. While Diddy took the spotlight, Riley stayed in the cut, producing, mentoring, building. Their creative paths diverged, but the bond they had from Uptown Records and those early studio sessions never really broke. And that's where things start to get complicated. Because as Diddy's empire grew, so did the stories. In public, it was all luxury and champagne. But behind the scenes, people who were there, bodyguards, insiders, and eventually whistleblowers, say the lifestyle turned dark. That those legendary parties weren't just about networking or celebration. They were power plays, disguised as social events.
So, we here to try to raise money for these, mosquito bed nets. So if you don't understand, just imagine living in Africa and your little infant child just gets bit by a mosquito and he died.
It started with the white parties. From 1998 to 2009, Diddy hosted a series of annual all-white gatherings, strict dress code, high security, and a guest list that read like the Grammy red carpet. Jay-Z, Beyonce, Justin Bieber, Mariah Carey, Donald Trump. These weren't casual events, they were cultural resets. And Teddy Riley was often adjacent to that same circle. The parties were glamorous, staged in East Hampton, St. Tropez, Beverly Hills. Some were co-sponsored by Sony or PlayStation. Diddy once arrived in 2 helicopters carrying a historic copy of the Declaration of Independence. Another year, he gave political speeches between live performances. They were bigger than album releases. They were statements. But even back then, people noticed the undertone, the exclusivity, the pressure, the unspoken rules. It wasn't long before the white parties became a gateway to something else, something insiders started calling freak-offs.
When Combs didn't get his way, he was violent, and he subjected victims to physical, emotional, and verbal abuse so that they would participate in the freak-offs.
These weren't public. They weren't even whispered about in open rooms. They were invitation-only, high-security events allegedly hosted in private mansions, luxury hotels, and yachts, and the energy was different. Not just glamorous, not just elite, exploitative. Over the years, lawsuits and federal investigations began to confirm what insiders had feared all along. These weren't parties. They were systems, environments designed to strip people of control, using power, drugs, intimidation, and sometimes cameras. One lawsuit described non-consensual filming. Another referenced kidnapping and threats of violence. When authorities raided Diddy's homes in 2004, they reportedly found over 1,000 bottles of baby oil. A bizarre but consistent detail across multiple testimonies. So where does Teddy Riley fit into all this? That's the hard part. He's not accused of participating in anything criminal, but he was close enough to Diddy during the most active years of these parties that people can't help but ask, what did he know? And the truth is, Riley's silence speaks volumes. For someone who's been so vocal about music, about legacy, about the business of sound, he's been silent on the biggest controversy tied to someone he once mentored. Why? Some say he didn't know. Others say he couldn't afford to say anything. The more cynical ones believe he made a choice to protect the brand, the proximity, the access. to look the other way while his former protege allegedly crossed every imaginable line. There are also rumors, never confirmed, that Riley acted as a gatekeeper during this time, that his approval opened doors for artists trying to enter Bad Boy's orbit, and that if you weren't in alignment with him or Diddy's circle, you didn't stand a chance. To this day, Riley hasn't made a single public statement about Diddy's legal troubles. Not during the raids, not after the lawsuits, not after the headlines about exploitation and physical violence. Not once. Maybe it's loyalty, maybe it's fear, maybe it's guilt. But whatever it is, people are starting to notice. Because when someone helps build an empire and then says nothing as it starts to crumble, you can't help but wonder what role they really played behind the scenes. As Teddy Riley quietly stayed close to the Bad Boy orbit, others weren't so quiet. One of the loudest and most consistent voices calling Diddy out wasn't a tabloid or a blogger or a lawsuit. It was Mase. And his story doesn't just expose Diddy's alleged business manipulation. It gives context to the kind of system Teddy Riley might have helped protect by staying silent. Mase was one of Bad Boy's crown jewels. Charismatic, smooth, and marketable, he helped define the shiny suit era alongside Diddy. Songs like Can't Nobody Hold Me Down, Been Around the World, and Mo Money Mo Problems made Mase a household name.
Who's hot, who not? Tell me who rock, who sell out in the stores.
But behind the scenes, things were unraveling early. By 1999, just 2 years after Biggie's death, and amid rising tensions at the label, Mase walked away from music entirely, citing a newfound calling as a minister. Some saw it as a spiritual awakening, others saw it as an escape.
I cannot speak to people outside of the church the way I speak to people inside the church.
He didn't name names then, but over the years the pattern became clearer. Legal drama, incarcerated artists, rumors of violence, and a growing sense that Diddy's empire wasn't built clean. When Mase tried to come back in 2004 with Welcome Back, and again in 2009 with the single Get It, his career never fully regained traction. Not because of lack of talent, but because of what was happening behind the scenes. At one point, Mase crashed a live radio interview Diddy was doing on V103 in Atlanta, documents in hand, demanding to be released from his contract. Diddy signed the papers live on air, allowing Mase to appear as a featured artist. But it was later revealed that Bad Boy still held the publishing rights to all of Mase's classic music, meaning Mase still couldn't collect royalties or take full control of his catalog. He had freedom on paper, but financially, he was still trapped. In 2020, the tension exploded again. Mase went public with claims that he'd offered Diddy $2 million to buy back the rights to his publishing. Diddy refused. Even after preaching black excellence and ownership in speeches and public appearances, he still refused to sell Mase his own music. Mase aired his frustrations in a now viral Instagram post, and later in a diss track called Oracle 2, The Liberation of Mason Betha. The lyrics didn't just come for Diddy's business practices, they challenged the core of his legacy. You ain't no architect, you just a N who know how to market death. Diddy fired back, branding Mase a fake pastor, and claiming Mase still owed him $3 million from an undelivered album.
You know, I did one album with Mase. One album. How much money do you think I owe this guy? One album, and then he became a fake pastor and went and conned people.
The back and forth only confirmed what many already suspected. Diddy's control over his artists wasn't just about contracts. It was personal, financial, spiritual, and often irreversible. But here's where Teddy Riley's silence becomes deafening. Riley and Mase worked within the same circles. Riley helped shape the sound Mase made millions off of. He was one of the few producers who could have spoken out, who could have said, "This man deserves his music. This is wrong." And yet, nothing. In 2023, just before the release of his first album in 17 years and ahead of receiving the Global Icon Award at the VMAs, Diddy announced he was returning publishing rights to former Bad Boy artists.
Sean Diddy Combs is reportedly giving back publishing rights to artists under his Bad Boy Records label. According to multiple reports, Combs is reassigning the music publishing rights to artists who helped make his record label into what it is today.
The move was hailed by some as unprecedented. But when you look closer, it wasn't so simple. The artists had to sign non-disclosure agreements and release Diddy from any past wrongdoing. In other words, take your catalog back, but keep your mouth shut. Mace, as of late 2023, still hadn't signed. He refused to let go of the truth just to get his royalties. That stand made him one of the few former Bad Boy artists still fighting on principle, not just profit. And through it all, Teddy Riley has said nothing. No public support, no recognition of Mace's fight, no call for Diddy to do better. That silence matters because Riley didn't just shape the sound of Bad Boy. He helped shape the system that allowed exploitation to be rebranded as the music business. And if someone with Riley's power and platform still won't speak out, maybe the system was working exactly how he wanted it to. Teddy Riley doesn't speak on controversies. That's always been his thing. He lets the music talk. But with everything that's come out about Diddy, the lawsuits, the raids, the decades of allegations, people have started asking a new kind of question. Not, what did Teddy Riley do? But, what does Teddy Riley know? Because being close to power doesn't just put you in rooms. It puts you in history. And Riley was in some of the most pivotal rooms of the 90s and 2000s, when artists vanished, when careers collapsed, and when some of the biggest stars in the world got caught in life or death situations. Literally. Let's talk about one of the biggest, Biggie's death. The notorious B.I.G. wasn't just Diddy's star artist, he was the heart of Bad Boy. But when he was killed in Los Angeles in 1997, questions about how and why it happened have never fully gone away. Gene Deal, Diddy's former bodyguard, has repeatedly said there were people who knew more than they ever admitted. That the setup wasn't random. That the protection wasn't tight enough for a reason. And who was still close to Diddy during all that? Teddy Riley. No one has accused Riley of involvement, but he had long-standing relationships not just with Diddy, but with executives, engineers, and insiders who were around during that time. He saw how the machine worked. He understood the politics, the tension, the rivalries. Some even say he helped mediate sessions between artists in the East Coast-West Coast beef era. That's why his silence has weight. He was a trusted voice on both coasts. He knew Suge. He knew Diddy. He was producing for top artists during one of the most dangerous periods in hip-hop history. Now, let's talk about Shine, another major Bad Boy name who took a fall for Diddy after the 1999 nightclub shooting. Riley wasn't directly connected to the case, but he was still active during that time. And he's never publicly criticized how that situation unfolded, even as Shine went to prison while Diddy walked free.
I was defending him, and he turned around and called witnesses to testify against me.
That kind of loyalty doesn't go unnoticed. But in today's climate, loyalty without explanation starts to look like silence with a purpose. Then there's the speculation around Riley's knowledge of industry setups, including fake deals, ghostwriters being cut out, and engineered collapses of artists who became too independent. Insiders have said that Riley, while not predatory, was a master of the industry system. He understood how to build artists, but also how to control outcomes. And when that knowledge gets passed to someone like Diddy, it raises questions about what tools were taught and how they were used. Some of Riley's own associates have fallen out of the spotlight without explanation. There are still unresolved financial disputes involving artists from his camp. Some say he knew which artists were being cut out of their own songs, their own publishing, and said nothing. Others believe he was used as a buffer the respected name who helped sell a contract that ended up doing long-term damage. And now, as more victims come forward in the Diddy investigations, alleging drugging, manipulation, Riley's past associations are being re-examined. That's where Teddy Riley's position becomes complicated. He was the gate opener, the co-signer, the innovator. But in the eyes of many, he was also the man who never blew the whistle. Even when everything around him started to collapse, he never defended Mace, never acknowledged Cassie, never said a word when Kid Cudi said his car was bombed, never challenged the system he helped build. Some believe it's generational, that Riley comes from an era where speaking out meant getting shut out. Others say he's just protecting his legacy, afraid that if he confirms what he knows, the entire timeline of black music in the 90s starts to look very different. Because if someone like Teddy Riley ever came forward, it wouldn't just shake Diddy. It would force the industry to admit that the cover-up was never one person's doing. It was a network, a system. And the most dangerous thing about a system is the people who quietly keep it running. When people talk about Teddy Riley, they usually mention the music, the platinum plaques, the New Jack Swing sound, the way he fused R&B and hip-hop long before it became a formula. But this story isn't just about rhythms and melodies. It's about power, silence, and the invisible toll of being the man behind the curtain while others step into the spotlight. Riley's name doesn't show up in tabloids the way Diddy's does. You won't find long lists of lawsuits, leaked videos, or federal agents knocking at his door. But that doesn't mean he's untouched by the mess. His connection to Diddy runs too deep for that. Not just professionally, but spiritually. Because Riley was there in the rooms where sounds were born and deals were whispered. And that closeness, that quiet mentorship, may be the very reason he stayed silent all these years. He knew too much, and in this industry, knowing too much without saying anything makes you just as dangerous as those who talk too loud. Teddy Riley was one of the most talented architects the music world has ever seen, but he also became a case study in how innovation can be stolen, repackaged, and commercialized, all while the originator is left clapping from the sidelines. The whispers about Riley and Diddy's private dealings, the rumors of Riley's presence at those infamous bad boy parties, his alleged involvement in gatekeeping artists, and his supposed knowledge of the inner workings behind the music industry's darkest secrets aren't going away. If anything, they've only grown louder as Diddy's legal walls crumble. Because the question people are now asking isn't just, what did Diddy do? It's, who helped make it possible? And worse, who stayed silent long enough for it to grow? Anyway, that's it for this video, folks. Bye.